Joe Biden. And yesterday, he got really emotional, real exercised, and he called an impromptu press conference, although it wasn't really a press conference because he barely took questions from the media. But it was all about getting that funding for his Ukraine bill. This is what exercises him. This is what gets him excited. And at one moment, one of the reporters shouted out a question to him. And it's a very simple question. You've said that you had no interactions with your son's business partner. So why is it you've had so many business interactions and personal interactions with your son's business partners? His answer is quintessential Joe Biden.
President Biden, on Ukraine and also China, there's polling by the Associated Press that shows that almost 70% of Americans, including 40% of Democrats, believe that you acted either illegally or unethically in regards to your family's business interests. Can you explain to the Americans, amid this impeachment inquiry, why you interacted with so many of your son and brother's foreign business associates?
I'm not going to comment on that. I did not, and it's just a bunch of lies.
You didn't interact with many of their business associates?
I did not. There's lies.
I'm not going to comment on this except to deny it and say that it's lies. Well, forgive me. I know that your brain is in fact mashed potatoes, as we often note on this program. But by claiming that that's a lie, you are in fact commenting on this. And of course, by saying it's a lie, you are yourself lying, because we've seen the pictures, we've seen the text messages, we've seen the emails. Joe Biden interacted with his son and his brother's business associates at least 22 times that have been documented. And he's still denying it. But he always has denied it from the very beginning. Whenever anybody brings it up, did you see the look on his face? Did you see the anger, the vitriol? Look at him snarling. Those are lies. Remember when an Iowa voter back in 2015, before the Iowa caucuses, said, why did your son do all these things? He said, you're a liar, man. I'm going to take you outside behind this. But that's what he always does. He gets aggressive. He gets in your face and acts like you're the problem. How dare you bring up the truth? They're not lies. And he still hasn't answered the question. It's a real easy question to answer, by the way. And he won't. Do you know why? Because he's trapped. That said, when he did get really passionate and really exercised about the only thing that matters to him, apparently, which is to keep funding the government of Ukraine, he had some whoppers. The most disturbing one, actually, we'll get to in a moment. But first, he decided to lambaste Republicans for daring to say, okay, pal, you want your Ukraine funding. This is a legislative process. We negotiate things. How about this? How about you actually enforce the laws on the border? And we write new laws that keep you from claiming amnesty if you don't actually have any claim for amnesty, because that's the loophole that people are parading through by the tens of thousands per day through our border by falsely claiming amnesty. Let's change the language in our amnesty laws. Let's shut this down once and for all. Then maybe you can have your Ukraine funding. Here's Biden's response.
Extreme Republicans are playing chicken with our national security, holding Ukraine's funding hostage to their extreme partisan border policies.
Yeah. By shutting down the border and actually securing our nation, that's extreme and partisan to this guy. And he says we're playing chicken with national security. Understand for a second what he means there. I'll play it from the beginning again.
Extreme Republicans are playing chicken with our national security.
The question here is Ukraine funding for the Ukrainian war with Russia or our border security. And between those two issues, the only one that he considers to be our American national security interest is the Ukraine question. That's what he's characterizing as playing chicken with our national security. The border problem, that has nothing to do with our national security, even though the Border Patrol falls under literally the Department of Homeland Security. For this guy, the problem is you're not giving enough money to Ukraine. And then it got really disturbing because the president said something that a president should never say unless we are at an extremely high threat level. Listen.
Well, we've committed as a NATO member that we defend every inch of NATO territory. Then we'll have something that we don't seek and that we don't have today. American troops fighting Russian troops. American troops fighting Russian troops if he moves into other parts of NATO.
I hope you understand the gravity of what he just did there. If you don't give me the money that I demand right now for Ukraine, the next step is we will have American troops fighting Russian troops. Now, the point he's trying to make is that if Russia wins in Ukraine, then they're going to move forward to Poland, and Poland is part of NATO. And we have a treaty that says if Russia invades a NATO country, we will commit American troops to defend that NATO country. But what he just said there was not quite that cut and dry, was it? It was tagged completely to funding. And he repeated twice that American troops would be fighting Russian troops. How do you think that goes over in Russia? What do you think the Russian ear hears when the president of the United States is raising the specter of American troops fighting Russian troops? And a little later in the day, his National Security Council spokesperson, John Kirby, repeated it, but in even more drastic, dire, and offensive terms.
And so we can't support Ukraine. Their chief advisor yesterday said they're likely to lose this war if they lose U.S. support. And Putin gets all of Ukraine, then what? Then where does he go? Because right then, he's up against the eastern flank of NATO. And if you think the cost of supporting Ukraine is high now, just imagine how much higher it's going to be, not just in national treasure, but in American blood, if he starts going after one of our NATO allies. Because as the president also said, we take our Article 5 commitments very seriously.
American blood. American blood. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I think that the White House should be a little more cautious, a little more judicious, and a little more circumspect when they start raising the specter of engaging American troops overseas to fight against a foreign country and using terms like American blood that will be spilt at the direction of this White House. Two real important points that you need to know about this. The first is the language here that's being employed by these thugs, by these bullies. And again, it's all about not getting the billions of your dollars that they demand. You give us the American people's money so we can spend it in Ukraine. That's what they want. And the stakes are being raised higher and higher because finally we have a Republican majority in the House that's saying, we're not going to give you a blank check. And what you've got here from the president and from John Kirby is tantamount to them saying, it's a real nice family you've got there. Sure would be a shame if one of your sons or daughters was sent over to fight a war and their blood was spilt. Wouldn't want that to happen. So pony up with the funding for Ukraine. It's despicable. It's disgusting. And it's the kind of thing that used to be condemned across the board in American politics and certainly in the American news media. But what I'm telling you right now, you didn't hear much of last night, did you? Or this morning. Oh, one other thing you need to know. They're raising the specter of Russia after they win in Ukraine. They're claiming if we don't fund them, they will beat Ukraine, and now Russia will possess Ukraine. They're raising the specter that their next step is to invade a NATO country. That country is Poland. I want you to Google this. Go ahead and look it up. In September, the Polish government said they were going to stop arming Ukraine. So I just need you to understand this, and then I need you to ask this question. They won't answer it, but the question needs to be asked. If this White House is now threatening that if they don't get their funding, our American sons and daughters in the military will be deployed and their blood will be spilt, as John Kirby just alluded to, then if that's going to happen because Russia invades Poland, why isn't Poland worried about it? Why isn't Poland arming Ukraine anymore? And I know, oh, well, it's because they have a grain dispute and they're having disputes over their border and they're having to, okay, I get that. But you would think Poland would be the most worried about Russia. And apparently, no, John Kirby and Joe Biden are.